This is the easiest opening for black because you literally play the same thing against absolutely everything. E4, D4, C4, like my opponent is playing here. You don't care. You play D6, next move, you play E5, you immediately fight for the center here. You are never afraid of him taking here on E5 and going into the endgame. In fact, this one is actually already better for black according to the engine. Can you imagine that? Never be afraid of having your king in the center if there are no queens on the board. Yes, if the queens are still there, you might get checkmated. But without it, your king is actually great there because it's covering so many squares, controlling important situations so that you don't get into trouble. Now, how do you easily outplay your opponent in this exact line? In fact, this is the one where I have my highest win rate, and you're gonna have here once you understand the ideas. This knight, how do you neutralize it? You simply play the move f6 and you control all of the squares it can go to, and of course defend the pawn. In fact, I have an entire course based on this exact opening to help you dive 1000 times deeper into it. The link would be in the description. Right now you get a full month of live coaching with me included. It's all free, included in the course if you join now, so make sure to grab your limited spot. Pause the video for a second here. Try to find the best move for black. It's so instructive. I hope you found it. Of course, it's the move c6. Absolutely the same logic as with this one. Now we play c6 to cover all the squares. This knight can go forward, and as a result, both of those knights are absolutely useless. Imagine how great is that. He cannot do anything with it. Okay. Bishop to e3, I don't really understand why you're not pushing the e4 pawn, the e pawn forward first, but I don't care. I just play bishop e6. The bishop is very good here. Again, thanks to this pawn on f6, this knight cannot go there, and I attack the pawn on c4. The best thing you can do every single time, try to guess my move and then check it with my calculations, with my variations, to see how good you understand this position. b3, he defends the pawn. It's already great that I develop a new piece and he has to make a passive move just trying to deal with my threat. My plan next is very simple. Put the knight to d7. It's a very good square for this guy. And then later I can play bishop to c5. That would be my idea, but first I never make a move without thinking what my opponent played. I cannot play bishop c5 now, as I'm gonna just blunder my bishop. Please do not do that, because next you're going to come into the comment and say, well, this is such a horrible opening. I have lost in 10 moves. Well, it's not because of the opening. It's because you blunder your piece in one move. So to avoid that, every single time before you make your move, try to think, okay, what kind of move my opponent can do? And especially if you play something like bishop c5, attacking the bishop with the bishop, you have to think, what if he just takes me? Is it a problem for me? Turns out, yes, it's a problem, but it's easy to solve it once you understand it. Just play king to c7. Now you don't have any pins and you are ready to go for it. Yet, still, bishop to c5 is not that simple because of rook takes d7 check, right? And then bishop takes and he takes on c5 and he gets two minor pieces for one rook. Two minor pieces are much stronger, so we never want to do that. But I encourage you to remember that idea. We are going to come back to this bishop c5. First, we need to make it possible. To achieve that, I played this move knight h6. Very cool one as an idea to remember. I'm threatening knight to g4, like immediately. That is a huge problem. So he plays h3 to stop it. But then I can play knight to f5, attacking the bishop yet again, and he has to go somewhere backwards. I don't even know where. And we have developed a new piece, which is very active. If he would have taken, that's never a problem. We just take it back, and we have a pair of bishops. Very cool as well. Let's go for it. Knight to f5. So now, after the bishop goes backwards, we can play bishop to c5. So we never forgot about that idea. We just, try to make it possible. Let's go for it. Because that is another piece we developed that creates a threat for our opponent at the same time. Also, what's going to be useful is that if he somehow attacks our knight, g4, e4, we can jump to d4, center of the board, and our bishop protects it. Okay, he plays knight to e4 instead, which is also possible. Now he threatens again, rook takes d7, and in any case I don't want to lose my bishop, so I'm gonna play bishop b6, but I don't really like this knight on e4. It's like very weird there. Instead of the pawn, not even sure what to do. Maybe one idea is he wants to play g4, and if I go backwards, he's gonna have knight to d6. But remember, I planned to play knight to d4, more active. e3, now he does threaten to play g4, but notice that this bishop has spent like 2 tempi to play bishop c1 to c1, which is never a good strategy. And so I have this additional time I can use. Maybe play knight to c5, another typical idea, and get rid of this guy, or just stop the g4 idea by playing h5. I like it even more. Now after h5, he cannot play g4. I'm gonna just take it and grab his rook. So he plays bishop e2. Now the rooks are connected and g4 is possible again. But guess what? I think I can even play h4 and stop the idea forever and make sure that my knight is very stable here. Let's do that, why not? Now that the knight is good, d6 idea is prevented, I'm ready to continue. I have a few options here. I can go ahead with this typical queenside attack with a5, a4, maybe even a3. Or I can just fight for this d file with the help of rook to d8. I don't see any problems with that at all. Just like that, from the very beginning of the game, we are the one creating threats for our opponent. We have overtaken the initiative, and that is almost 2000 elo rated player. So if you can beat this guy, you're ready to join the top 1% of the chess players, and you definitely can do that with this magic opening that requires you minimum memorization and just understanding of the ideas, which I'm happy to help you with. Let's see what my opponent does. Of course, at some point we can think about pushing those pawns forward, like removing the knight and then play f5 and e4, but I encourage you to be careful with that, not to create too many weaknesses in our camp. For example, when we play e4, he can jump to d4 with his knights, creating some problems. We might not want to do that. Okay, a3, very important. Always think what your opponent can do. He wants to play b4 and c5, and that is something we can never allow. So I automatically immediately play a5, because otherwise nothing has changed in the position. Maybe he still wants to play b4, but that is already a little bit of a different story. For example, I can take, play rook a4, attacking this b4 pawn. If he plays c5, I can still play rook takes b4. And if he defends it, I can even bring the second rook there. Not that simple for him to deal with it. But yeah, this is a cool resource for my opponent. He's such a strong player for some reason. Okay, he goes back to c3. I think he wants to play this b4 move. This is his idea. So maybe I even, I don't know, bring my bishop back. Now that he played e3, it's not really great on this diagonal. So maybe I just play bishop to c5, and if he plays knight to e4, back to e7, saying that, I'm sorry, my bishop is actually better on this diagonal, because it essentially stops the move b4 forever. So why not? You always think about strategic ideas of yourself, of your opponent, and if you feel that it's dangerous, it's important for you to stop his counterplay, then please do that, but try not to spoil your position in the process. And that's what I'm achieving with this remaneuvering the bishop back. You might say that was all not necessary, I could have just played bishop e7 in the beginning, and I definitely agree with you. I don't know, maybe I have overestimated what this bishop is doing there. It kind of stops my attack anyway. Yes, he plays knight e4, but obviously I'm not gonna go backwards, just gonna play bishop e7. And now I keep an eye on this a3 pawn, I stop the b4 move, and knight c5, whenever I need it, is still possible. I even control this d6 square one more time, so no knight d6 is possible for him. The question is, how do I create threats here? How do I actually crush him? Maybe fighting for the d file is still the best strategy. Playing rook d8. Okay, he goes for g4. So he's trying to take advantage of the fact that my bishop is no longer there, and so it doesn't attack the g3 pawn, which makes g4 possible, but I don't like it. I think now I'm gonna take it. And if he takes with the pawn, this is going to be an isolated pawn, and it's always going to be a weakness. This is not something I would be happy to have as white. And sometimes low-rated players do that. You don't even do anything special, but they just try to go forward, try to create something, and create a lot of unnecessary weaknesses as a result of that. Your task is then to use it the right way. Maybe he wants to play h4 and then g4. Even that, in the end of the day, leads just to a lot of weaknesses in his camp. But I want to play g5. That might also create a weakness in my camp on f6, but it's, at least for now, easily defendable. An alternative is just knight to c5. Actually, I like it much more. I'm attacking the knight. If the knight goes away, then this weakness on g3 is going to be lost. If the knight takes, however, then bishop takes, and my knight on f5 is attacking both g3 and e3, and I don't see any way for him to defend it. That's how it works. Once you have a good chess understanding, you just feel that g4 is wrong. I haven't really found it tactically before I saw knight c5, but I just see that those are way too many weaknesses my opponent voluntarily created for himself. Please, never. Chess is difficult enough. Never create those weaknesses voluntarily for yourself. This is literally the worst strategy you might imagine. Okay, now knight c5. And let's see what was the idea of my opponent. Maybe he's still not losing. Maybe he can play knight f to d2 back. In fact, that's the best he can do. And then, no, he cannot do that, because then the e3 pawn is still hanging. Oh my god, this is so unfortunate. But no coincidence. If you create that headache for yourself, sooner or later, it's gonna cause you some pain. I think at this point, my opponent regrets his decision. Maybe he can play g4. But to say the least, I can just take the knight and then win a pawn on f5. I felt immediately that this knight on e4 just doesn't feel naturally in front of the pawns. It can always be kicked away. It doesn't really create any threats. Very weird knight there. g4. Yes. Maybe that's the best chance, because he's losing a lot of stuff there anyway. But I'm taking here. Obviously, I'm not coming back. That would be very passive. Always, whenever your opponent makes a move, first try to understand this threat, but second, try to understand what is your most active way to deal with it. Maybe you can create a counter threat, not necessarily just defend and go passive. Yeah, now that's a free pawn to take. I do have some counter threats like knight g3 and knight f2, but my bishop is hanging. Bishop is a lot. And I can just take the pawn for free. That is what I am doing. I also attack this h3 pawn, and I have a threat of knight g3, and I have a threat of knight to f2. So suddenly all of my pieces are incredibly strong and powerful. If I need, I can bring my bishop back to c5 for the third time, because as he has his weakness on e3, the knight would be actually so great there. But first, I can just continue picking up material. This pawn on h3 is just hanging. It doesn't have any threats here. In fact, the rook on e1 is so passive, staring at the pawn on e3. I bet he would like to get rid of this pawn on e3. It blocks both of his bishop on c1 and his rook on e1. Your task is to make as many pieces as active as possible. My opponent did here the opposite. I mean, he's trying his best, and of course I respect that. I'm just showing it to help you not to repeat his mistakes in your games. So that, yeah, instead of going forward, he always goes backwards. He makes his pieces less and less active, and that's never, ever a good thing to do. Okay, rook h2. To show you an example, I don't go backwards, I go forward. The rook on the second rank is always extremely powerful. Here there are no pawns to take, all of the pawns are gone, but it's still a huge problem for my opponent. It attacks this bishop and it pins it, so it cannot move. Generally, like, all of his pieces are on the first two ranks, and they cannot even move, cannot even improve itself. This is so horrible. You might be wondering, what is this magic board I use in my videos? It's called Chess Not Evo. and I enjoy it so much. I have it for a year now. It completely transformed the way I play chess and I train chess, because I can play both on Chess and chess.com online, but on a real board. It's a completely different experience, and I enjoy it a lot. I haven't had any major issues, and that's my favorite product from Chestnut, because I have everything in one place. I have my books here, I have my studies here, I have my games, but they have so many different products according to your needs and your budget. The best part is, of course, you can use the link in the description as well as the promo code journeytograndmaster to get a big discount on all Chestnut products. Now, back to video. This is what happens when you're active, when you go forward, when you create as many threats for your opponent as possible. It's so difficult for him to even deal with it. Yeah, he plays another, like, what is left is to play bishop f1, to have all of the stuff on the first rank, and then we are ready for the next game. All right, how do I crush him? Because even this position you can easily spoil. Just blunder one thing and the game is gone. So make sure that you always cover your opponent's threats, whatever he might have created. For example, this bishop is now free to go. Maybe it can create some threats, hopefully not. I can play knight to c3, and that might be the first move that you are thinking about. But I would rather develop a new piece every single time, so that I have even more and more opportunities. For example, bring in this bishop to c5. Why not? Finally, it's there, very active, putting even more pressure on his position. Then, maybe I even bring my second rook to the h-file and double the rooks along the second rank. One rook on the second rank is great, but two is even better, because I can create so many more threats for him. And now knight c3 makes more sense, as after rook to d2, I would have an additional idea of bishop takes e3. Very powerful attack and pretty much everything. And the biggest problem is I don't see a single thing that he can do here. Maybe bishop f3, but it doesn't even create a threat. Knight to f3. Okay, yeah, that move I have anticipated, but I thought I always have this move rook to f2, so that he cannot attack me again. I'm attacking the knight as well, and now I'm ready for knight to c3. The bishop cannot move because of checkmate in one, rook a2, and I'm also attacking this bishop. The knight on g1 was defending it, now it's not. Okay, he plays knight h4, trying to at least create one threat in a row, which is already good. But I'm not going to allow him to exchange the pieces. I'm going to just play bishop h7 back. The more pieces you exchange when you have the initiative, the simpler it gets for your opponent to neutralize it. I don't want that. I want to keep as many as possible and instead keep creating threats. I think I can just play g5 now. He cannot go to f5. I controlled that square twice. Okay. First, always think about the threats. And he has here rook to d7. Check. At least one active move in a row. So of course, I'm not going to allow that. I'm going to play f5 and block the connection between the bishop and the d7 square, and then I can play g5 later on. In the end of the day, I have a passer here. Whenever you have a passer, try to move it forward and use it to your advantage. Even if you are not going to promote your pawn necessarily, you're going to deflect your opponent's pieces, and that's going to help you on other parts of the board. Look at this bishop on c1, how miserable it is, having zero chances to participate in the game. Maybe now, like bishop b2, and I have created a weakness for myself because I needed to go forward, but I can easily defend. I mean, this rook is the only one that is not participating in the game, and obviously I want to activate it, but somehow I don't have time. He's keeping creating some difficulties for me, which he should. Knight c3, I don't feel that it's very powerful for me, just because he can play rook d2, and then my rook is hanging. After the exchange, my knight is hanging, so I don't feel it's so great. But my knight, it's not like hanging, but I don't know, I don't want to get those double pawns. I can play g5. The knight cannot move because the bishop is hanging, so he has to take the knight on e4. And then this knight on h4 would be trapped. So I'm basically just winning a piece. That is what happens if you are always going forward, always creating new threats. At some point, your opponent just collapses. He cannot handle all of it. Knight f5, just take it back with the bishop, and bishop takes e4. Yes, I can take the knight on h4, but then he is free to go back with his bishop. You always want to take the strongest piece first, and then, yeah, that one on h4 still struggles. The knight on the side of the board is the worst possible position you can have it on. But he creates a counter threat, and that is something pretty powerful, something I haven't considered. Because after I take him, he is gonna play rook g7, check, and win the bishop back. The bishop is kind of stuck here. That's also something I don't like. But thank God I have some moves. I can play rook to g8 here, just supporting my pawn and covering this g file. But yeah, that was the best chance. Now that I think about it, maybe in fact taking the knight was better. So you see, it doesn't matter how great your move seems to be, you always think about your opponent's response. And you never think like, okay, his knight is trapped, he cannot do anything. No, think maybe he can create some threats for you, some active opportunities, something I haven't done here. Obviously, I'm not perfect, I make mistakes myself. All right. Still, I like this position a lot. I don't regret anything because I have a pair of bishops. Even though my bishop on h7 is not great yet, I can improve it. If I can bring it somewhere like f3, that would be absolutely tremendous. Let me do that. Let me bring my bishop to f5. Maybe he can exchange a pair of rooks, but like I'm 2 pawns up. Yes, it's doubled, but this is a huge pawn. Maybe I should have started with g4, g3. I don't know. I like everything. To be honest, that guy, yeah, now he finally develops it. By the way, this is also cool. On the other hand, I'm not really afraid of losing that pawn, just because it's doubled anyway. So maybe I can use the time to do what I wanted to do and bring my bishop to f3, and then this e3 pawn would be hanging. And also once he plays bishop e5, this a3 pawn would be hanging. Not that I need it too much, but still. Bishop h3 is, of course, another opportunity, just immediately attacking the knight, and if the knight is gone, bishop takes e3 is the next move. In fact, that feels very powerful. But I like bishop g4 even more, because I want to eventually go to f3 and not to h3. So let me play that. Nice advantage of having extra material is that you can always sacrifice it without any regrets. Like, I had this pawn extra anyway. So it's okay to lose it again. King b6. The king is super safe there, and everything is under attack. If anything, that might even help me, because I feel that my bishops are more open now. Let's say I take on a3, there would be some diagonals available for me. Yes, he plays rook f1, trying to save his stuff, but it's not possible. I'm gonna just take it and play bishop f3, attacking the knight, and once the knight is gone, I'm taking that e3 pawn, and that is really important, because then I'm gonna have 2 passers. 1 is good, but 2 are even better. Maybe he is in time to defend it, right? He's gonna play knight to e1, and then if I take on e3, he's gonna take on f3 and take the pawn back. I'm not gonna allow that. I'm gonna just play g4. That is a dream outcome. Basically, I'm about to promote the pawn. Nice move not making. And the e3 pawn is still hanging. If he takes on f3, I'm happy to take it probably with the e pawn, so that I create 2 passers there. Okay, knight c2 is defending all of the pawns, and he's happy about that. But what about this guy? It's coming all the way to g2. If you have a passer, try to push it forward to create some problems for your opponent. Yes, his bishop is great, but that's not good enough. All I need to do is play g2 and maybe remaneuver my bishop all the way to f2 and attack his rook. First, my opponent is of course under attack, so let's play g2 and make sure we don't lose it. And now this great remaneuvering begins. Another way to go about it, just to play, I wanted to say rook h8 and rook h1, but of course the rook would be hanging there. Not a problem, I can play rook g5, attacking this guy, it goes away, and then rook h5 and rook h1. And you cannot even play bishop h2 because I control that square, so what do you do? But okay, he pushes me anyway, so then I'm gonna go ahead with my bishop remaneuvering. The bishop is now not doing much here, so I want to use that. Like bishop is for the third time or whatever time it is, I'm remaneuvering the bishop back. So you never know where your pieces are going to be useful. And one part of the board of the game, it could be this square. Later on, it could be something completely different. Here, for example, the bishop is best on f2. I'm going all the way there. He cannot do absolutely anything against it. That is how powerful two bishops are, how powerful the passer is, and how powerful it is to have all of your pieces as active as possible, not to allow your opponent to create any counter threat. That's what I did the entire game, starting with this beautiful opening, the Philidor defense. You can either love it or hate it, and you only can hate it if you don't understand the principles enough. Hopefully, after this video, you understand it much better. Bishop f2, and I think it's time for my opponent to resign, because your rook is hanging, and if you go away, I just promote a pawn and win it. He doesn't want to resign, because he is hoping to give me a checkmate. Maybe he is not... Wait a second. Maybe it's not that simple, because... Wow! He has created a mating net. Can he give it checkmate? I'm suddenly excited for my opponent more than for myself, because if he can give me a checkmate here, that would be a comeback of the year. Like rook king a6 or king a7 is already a checkmate. He plays rook a1. Wow, how blind I was to all of that. If that is not a perfect example of it's never too late to spoil your game, then I don't know what is. Because I somehow remaneuvered all of my pieces there. It made sense, like, to promote my pawn, but what about my king? Obviously, instead of bishop f2, I should have been not blind to my opponent's threats and think what he wants to achieve, and for example, play c5. That would immediately finish all of his checkmating hopes. But now, the only move is king b5, not even like to get checkmated immediately. And he still checkmates me, 94. Oh my god, I feel like I'm a part of a thriller. I thought he's gonna play rook to a1, and even that is a checkmate. He's threatening rook a5 and knight d4 at the same time. But of course, knight d4 is even better, just not giving me a chance. Wow. That is hilarious, just losing this beautiful game in one move. That is what happens to me in my tournaments as well. I play a beautiful game sometimes, everything is perfect, and in the end of the day, I just blunder something. But I hope you can learn a lot out of it. Congratulations to my opponents. I also won a lot of games like that, because I never give up, and I'm always looking for my chances. And sometimes a miracle like that can happen, even if you play against a much stronger opponent. So, well done. Where should I go? I want to allow my opponent to give a checkmate. Let's go to a4, it's more beautiful there. Rook a1, checkmate. I deserved it. I hope you enjoyed this game, because first you learned a beautiful opening, which you can use to crush anyone under 2000, and second, you learn that it's never too late to spoil your game and miserably lose. Hopefully, you're never gonna repeat my mistake.